Hi everyone, at last I've managed to get on here. As most of you all know, Alfie's been quite poorly this week. He's had a chest infection which has been treated with steroids and antibiotics. Today he's a lot better, I'm glad to say. I've been there every day, most of the day with him. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, today. And our children have been there also, but yeah, he's rallied, so he's a strong one. So I'm glad to be able to get on it for a little bit of light relief really, and start again giving a little bit of detail about Aisling and her family. We left it, didn't we, in the last video, where her husband had died, Eamon had died, and left her with 2 young children in a house which had been their marital home, but which had passed by law to Eamon's eldest son from his first marriage. But Aisling was of course allowed to live there under duress, I suppose you'd say. She had a small amount of money that Eamon had left to her, but obviously she needed to make a move, she needed to do something. Salvation came again via her parents. They knew of a family who had moved to England. This family, very respectable family, had, I don't know whether they bought or were renting 2 rather large houses, 3-storey houses, and a bit like the one that I grew up in really, maybe a bit bigger, but they bought 2 of them adjacent to a park, and had opened them up as lodging houses, mostly for small families or Irish men who'd come to England looking for work during that period. So Aisling was offered a position within the household. Her 2 children were welcome. They had 2 attic rooms, I believe. The one room, the larger room, being used as a small kitchen at one end, and then a living area, and a part at the back that had been sectioned off for her son Rory to sleep. And then the second room, smaller room, was for Aisling and her daughter Mary to sleep in, and all their luggage, etc., I suppose. So that was the situation. They travelled to England in, I believe, 1940, thought it was. They travelled to England in 1940. Well, that was the year of the Battle of Britain. So the crossing must have been absolutely horrendous. It must have been frightening. You know, there were German submarines on the prowl in the Irish Sea and the Atlantic. And for Aisling to take such a risk with her 2 children, she must have been desperate. Not only the risk of the crossing, but the risk of moving from the comparatively safe haven of Ireland to the United Kingdom, which was of course under siege by Hitler. So what have I written? I've already told you that. Yeah, they were given rooms and lodgings free, and Aisling received in return for, she was a very good cook and a very good dressmaker. She made all her own clothes, made clothes for Mary, So she was became indispensable in that household, for her cooking skills, her domesticity, and her work as a seamstress. So she was happy there, by all accounts. She was. Yeah, her thinking was, and I said, you know, she must have been desperate to risk the crossing and to risk living in a war zone. But it said, you know, her way of thinking was that this was going to provide comparative security for her and her children. And also in her mind, I've read where Mary, being illegitimate, Aisling's illegitimate daughter, with her lover David, she was scorned and teased and ridiculed at school, and her life was made a misery. She was never accepted. Everybody knew she wasn't Eamon's child and that Rory was. And so life for Mary was very, very difficult, and this was going to be a fresh start for her also. So, I told you that bit. Yeah, told you that bit. So she lived in the house and she worked, I suppose you could say, as a drudge again, but she got to meet a lot of different people. The family were kind to her. The children settled in schools. Yes, there was the war. Nothing much was mentioned about that in the paperwork that I've read through. But what happened to Aisling next was, again, unexpected. There were a lot of families in England looking for workmen and their wives, but more often than not, it was men alone who had travelled across to England looking for work and were lodging in this house. And Aisling became quite close to one particular man. He paid her a lot of attention, bearing in mind this young girl had been deprived of her one true love at the age of 18, was married off to a man nearly 40 years her senior, and had never known any real happiness in her life. She met this man who lodged in the house, didn't really know much about him, flattered by him, treated like a lady, and he listened to her, probably the first time in her life that she'd ever been listened to or treated as an equal, as a person. Unsurprisingly, at the age of, I have to check, at the age of 32, 33 years old, Aisling fell in love again for the second time. The man concerned didn't expect. He thought it was, just going to be a nice little jolly, I suppose, away from home. Aisling was too naive. Really, she was like a young girl because she'd been sheltered in a way. So it came about at the end of, in 1945, toward the tail end of the war, Aisling discovered that she was again pregnant with this man's child. I don't know what his name was. Let's call him Scum. So Her children then, Mary and Rory, were aged 16 and 12 years respectively. She was desperate, as obviously she would be. She didn't know what to do. Her employer, very kind lady, but misguided lady, and she was out of the depths. She took Aisling to a backstreet abortionist in Manchester. I don't know, I don't think I've got anything particularly about that. Anyway, she took her to this backstreet abortionist in Manchester, and it was a description that was in the notes: a grotty little house, dirty, down a dirty, greasy alleyway, old back-to-back houses. I don't know whether anybody in the US has seen the old slums in some of England's major cities where they had the back-to-back houses, and there were literally a row of front houses, and then to save costs there was a wall, and the house built the other way, back to back, and then there was a great big courtyard where there were lavatories and what they call brew houses, where the women would do their weekly laundry, their weekly wash. So Aisling was took to see this woman. It was said that she took one look at the woman's, the woman's nasty blackened fingernails and lined, sagging face with the dirt etched into the wrinkle lines, that she just fled. She just couldn't. And so, at the end of 1945, baby Luke was born. I haven't got the exact dates. They weren't in the paperwork, but I think you're getting the gist of the story and where it's going. So that's that for now. I want to come back on because I want to read you something, and then something else that I want to say. So I'm going to get on with some stuff I need to do now, and I'll be back a little bit later. Lots of love. Bye-bye.